críticos en este caso, y vamos a estar conversando también acerca de lo que es la tecnología, algunos pensamientos sobre sostenibilidad y un tema muy importante que es el almacenamiento de energía. Precisamente para este espacio vamos a tener a tres invitados de lujo que van a estar acompañando esa conversación. La invitación nuevamente es a que hagan muchísimas preguntas, que aprovechen por supuesto el espacio, que tengan la oportunidad de conocer estas perspectivas que nos van a traer hoy nuestros panelistas y de la misma manera que lo tuvimos en la sesión, en una de las sesiones anteriores, específicamente la energía nuclear, vamos a tener transmisión en vivo y traducción o interpretación en vivo. Entonces, para las personas que deseen escuchar esta conversación en el idioma natural, que va a ser inglés, la mayoría de la conversación va a ser en inglés, lo pueden hacer en inglés y si no, pueden hacerlo en español en la opción que aparece en el menú de botones que tiene en la parte inferior de Zoom. Se llama interpretación o interpretation para quienes tienen el sistema en inglés. Es un icono que es como un globo y quienes no lo ven a simple vista pueden encontrarlo en la opción de los tres punticos. Ahí pueden activar la opción de interpretación. La invitación también es a que las preguntas las puedan hacer tanto en inglés como en español para que la conversación fluya al final pues, de las presentaciones. Sin más preámbulo, vamos a dar inicio a la conversación de hoy. Si quieres, ponemos la siguiente slide, por favor. Y me voy a permitir introducir al primer speaker del día de hoy. Su nombre es Jeff Kars. Y Jeff obtuvo una maestría en Ingeniería de Minas y Geofísica y un doctorado en Ingeniería de Minas de la Universidad Católica de Lovaina, en Bélgica. Actualmente es profesor de Ciencias de la Tierra y Planetarias en la Universidad de Stanford, en California, y sus intereses de investigación se centran en la toma de decisiones bajo incertidumbre en el desarrollo de suministros de minerales críticos, así como la energía geotérmica necesaria para la transición hacia un 100% de energía renovable. Jeff también es fundador de Mineralex, una iniciativa comunitaria para fortalecer la gestión de recursos hacia un futuro próspero para todos, impulsando por el desarrollo de minerales en la Tierra. Jeff ha publicado en una amplia gama de revistas que abarcan matemáticas, estadísticas, ciencias de la Tierra, ingeniería y ciencias de la computación. También es autor de diferentes libros en diferentes áreas como la geoestadística de hidrocarburos, diferentes puntos de cuantificación de incertidumbre en sistemas de subsuelo. Así que, y bueno, también Jeff fue galardonado con la medalla Crumben de la IAMG por su trayectoria profesional. Así que, bueno, bienvenidos. Es un gusto que nos acompañen el día de hoy. Voy a continuar en inglés. Esta conversación se va en inglés. Así que, Jeff, welcome to this space, to this session of Engage. And you can start with your presentation.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and very, very glad to be here with you. I'm calling in from San Francisco here in California, and glad to be talking to you around the world. So my presentation will cover a number of issues in, I suppose, introduced in critical mineral exploration and the challenges that we are facing now in the world of obtaining these supply chains of critical minerals. So one of the major causes of the demand for critical minerals is the electrification of much of our energy systems. For example, the use of solar and wind energy, the use of battery electrical vehicles, all of these new systems that are going to replace the typical fossil fuel systems are going to require a very large amount of earth elements. These earth elements in a battery would be lithium, also copper, nickel and cobalt. But in general, also for electrification, you need to build perhaps nuclear facilities or more electrical grid. You are going to use a lot of copper in doing so. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about copper today and a little bit about lithium, as these are definitely very two interesting elements to consider. So what's going on in the world? Well, in the world, there's indeed a movement towards 2050, which we call net zero emissions, to electrify lots of our energy systems. In addition to that, we see many promises made by car companies or governments or international organizations, including here in California, which will at some point phase out the internal combustion engine or ICE vehicle and being replaced by battery electrical vehicles, or at least hybrid electrical vehicles. So what does that mean? So people have done some calculations and done some calculations where we are already assuming, let's say, that we're going to drive much less cars than today, right? So one way to save on energy is to do public transportation or to use your bicycle. But let's say that we already reduce in that area. And secondly, let's say that we can recycle every single battery and make a completely new battery out of it. Even in that case, as you see here, the projected growth of these battery electrical vehicles, whether they start maybe 2025 or 2030, maybe the trajectory is not quite right, but there's going to be incredible supply gap, for example, for lithium. And you see here, the gray bar is what we have today. And this is what we would need. Okay, so that means obviously a lot of new deposits need to be discovered. Let's now look at copper. Copper is something that we've been mining quite a long time, goes way back in human history. And so there are already a number of copper mines in operation. The other good news about copper is that it is very well recyclable and that we have many technologies to do recycling. So we don't really have to invent any new technologies. The issue with copper is that it is hard to substitute with another element. We could say, why don't we use aluminum? Well, aluminum doesn't unfortunately have the nice properties that copper has of conductivity, electrical conductivity, and others that are highly desirable properties. And so here we see indeed for copper as well, that over the long term, we're going to be requiring a very large amount of new discoveries in mines. And so if we would continue on the current path, then eventually we're going to get a significant deficit, even if we can do all the recycling that we want. So what's going on in the world around, for example, copper? So copper is mined in many countries, including South America, and particularly Chile being the largest producer, United States, also in Africa. We'll talk a little bit about that. But it seems like something is happening to copper if you follow this graph here. It shows that the grade, which is the concentration of copper found in new discoveries, and now mining is ever decreasing. So we started out with a 4% copper grade, and now we're at a 1% copper grade. And this is for the world. If you look at the United States here, you see that we are now mining at 0.5 or 0.4% of copper grade. So let's think about what that means to mine at a very low grade. When you think about mining at a very low grade, that means that you have to excavate an enormous amount of material out of the earth, usually using these open pit mines that you extract the copper out of. But then, 99.6% of the material is just waste. And so that waste has to be dealt with. That waste has to be put in tailings or in waste piles that themselves are themselves a danger if they would start collapsing. And this is kind of the stories that we've seen coming out of Brazil recently, where waste tailings flooded down valleys and killed many people. So the key is therefore to discover deposits that are much higher grade than the 0.5% copper. And that is true for all mining. So the higher grade, the higher the concentration of the metal, the lower the environmental impact will be. So projects that I'm involved with are in Zambia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They are known for all different type of copper deposit, and this copper concentration are above 5%. So if you go above 5% and you are underground, then you can actually mine with an underground mine. That means you can open a mine like you see here on the right, where there's one entry point, a shaft, that then goes down deep into the mine, excavates the material, and the waste that is processed at the surface is then being back integrated into the subsurface. So the pictures you see here on the left is a copper mine in the United States, and the picture on the right is a high-grade copper mine in the Congo. Now, these pictures don't do really justice. The picture that you should be comparing with is this picture here at the bottom. That is the footprint of the underground mine compared to the open pit mine. So it's clear that it's not just to find more deposits, but also deposits that are much higher quality and have less environmental impact. The same goes with other metals, right? Nickel, for example. Here you see a nickel mine in Sweden, big open pit mine, where the nickel grade is 0.2%. While here on the right-hand side, you see basically what looks like a building, right? It can almost be a school, where you see a high-grade nickel mine and 3%. So again, the impact we're seeing in the grade is very significant. The problem that we're now facing, however, on the planet is that lots of the low-grade nickel deposits are found in rainforests, in particularly Brazil and certainly Indonesia. And so that would require open pit mining in rainforest. And you can imagine the incredible devastation that has on the environment. So the discovery of high-grade deposits is desired. So you could wonder, why are we not discovering more high-grade deposits? This is a picture of what is going on in terms of discoveries, and this is not good news. Here we see, let's say at 100%, a metric of 100 and 90 of how well your capital was used to discover something. Let's say we call that 100. Then we see that the effect of your capital is diminishing as you go over time, in time towards today. In fact, today it takes almost more than $1 billion of investment to make one major discovery. And so that means that making discovery is a very difficult thing to do. In fact, today, about 1 in 200 times trying, you find a discovery, and trying costs lots of money, and that money will be wasted if you don't discover anything. So there is this decrease in exploration effectiveness. And so why is that happening? One of the reasons, and the major reason perhaps that is happening, is that all of the deposits that you can see at the surface, where you can walk around in the world and you hit a rock and that rock contains copper and is an indication of a copper deposit, all of those have been found, or almost all of those have been found. So it's very rare people walk around in nature and find rocks and find therefore huge deposits. All of the deposits we're now having to find are underground and not visible at the surface. So that means that we need completely new technology than just geology working on the ground. We need completely new technology that allows us to investigate under the subsurface. And one of those technologies that is critical is drilling. There's no way around drilling into the subsurface and making discoveries. There are other techniques out there, geophysical imaging techniques. You can fly with a plane and sense what is the gravitational field, what is the electrical field, but that's only an indirect indicator. In the end, you're going to have to drill. And of course, when you drill a very narrow hole of just a few centimeters, and you try to locate something that is only 500 meters wide. And so that is a big challenge, regardless of all these critical mineral deposits. So is there good news? There is good news, and I've been very privileged to be part of this good news, is that new technologies are coming to the fore where discoveries are now being made. And so one of these discoveries was announced this year. It's not by a mining company, it's by a startup company that is funded by venture capital funds in the United States, and a company that wants to rethink how mining should go, and in particular use modern technology such as digital data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence technology to help the world in achieving this big problem of finding deposits under copper. So what's the idea here? The idea is that in the past, there has been a lot of information already acquired around the world around various types of deposits. But this information has never really been ingested into computers or into databases. And so for that reason has not been used to the extent that it can be. So that is one application. The second application is also that artificial intelligence systems are making things more efficient. I think that is all around us now. If you live in San Francisco like I do, I see self-driving taxis with no driver, and they drive around and they pick up people, and they are extremely efficient. They don't have any accidents, and there's no liability. So the world can become much uh, more efficient in many ways through the use of artificial intelligence. And so the particular artificial intelligence I'll talk about. The other thing, however, that I want to talk about after this is to think about it is great to make this discovery, and this discovery was in Zambia. Its projected revenue is $50 billion of copper. But the problem, of course, is that these companies are funded by billionaires like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. So we don't want to also at the same time not go into a new cycle of creating colonialism and where rich people go into poor countries and make lots of money. So there's something that also needs to be done on the human side involving local communities. So let's talk a little bit about this discovery and what's so special about it. So this discovery is in an area of the world that is called the Copper Belt. The Copper Belt is between Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo, is a large prolific area where previously many cobalt deposits have been found in the Congo. But then if you go more south, you find more copper deposits. And so there have been copper deposits, but to find these deposits, you have to start drilling. And so the company bought an area, exploration area here near that lake. It's called Mingomba. And so were speculations that there could be high-grade deposits present there. But of course, right now, there's no information whatsoever. And so you need to start drilling in this pattern in order to explore and poke into the earth and find out how much great copper there is. And you probably have to go very deep, up to 1 kilometer deep. So this is very costly. So one borehole can cost $1 to $2 million. And so typically you need probably 100 boreholes in order to make a reasonably good assessment. So you're talking about $100 million investment. This is not a small investment. So what was done by the company and in collaboration with Mineral X, the program that my research lab that is involved in this and developed this kind of AI. So there, to think about intelligence, artificial intelligence, you have to think broadly about what are forms of intelligence here. And the intelligence you often hear about today is machine learning or deep learning. For example, ChatGPT and all these new generative AI tools, they call them, they're basically big computer programs where you can put input in and get some output out, and you train the system using information that's on the web. So that's great, but that doesn't tell us where to drill. It just maybe tells us how to do our homework. So we have developed other types of artificial intelligence, which is the intelligent agent. This is an actual real artificial intelligence where you train a system to make reasoning, to do logical things, such as, for example, playing chess. Playing chess is a game whereby you need to do many moves to beat an opponent, and you need to be able to look ahead from your current move into the future to see whether or not you can win a game. So the goal of chess is to win the game, and the actions you can do is moving pieces around the board, but you have lots of uncertainties, namely what is your opponent going to do? So this is similar in mineral exploration, right? You can drill in many locations, and that may lead you to making discoveries or deciding to walk away from the area. But you have many uncertainties, and these uncertainties have to do with the fact that the earth under our feet is not very well understood. So we've developed such an agent for drilling, and instead of the classical drilling, we let the artificial intelligence agent decide where to drill. So classically, a mining company would drill like every 100 meter and would go like around drilling every 100 meter. You could see this area is several kilometers wide. So that can take many years to do and many years to appraise the asset. So we're not playing that game like that. We're playing it like a chess game, and we drill, ask the AI to drill, and as the AI gets information through drilling, it learns. It reasons based on the information and can tell us where to drill the next borehole. And so that has led to this ultra high grade discovery with almost 6% copper on average in a very copper rich deposit, which can be mined underground, and that mine planning is now going on. Now, once you have discovered a resource, it takes still some time to make a mine. You have to find equipment, you have to build equipment, you have to build processing plants. All these things can take many, many years because these are huge amounts of equipment that need to go into developing a mine. The size of this deposit, as I mentioned, is quite large. And so here you could see this Mingoma discovery. It kind of looks something like that. It's something like the size of Manhattan with a core of very high-grade copper. Okay, so that is about why we need critical minerals and how new technologies are being developed to speed that up. But at the same time, we have to be concerned about not building a second colonialism or destroying the planet in doing so. So one of the things that mining, of course, is that it has a bad name. And I think one of the things to remember, though, is that it has a bad name mostly because of gold mining. Gold mining is very destructive. It happens in every country. It's also very profitable. It's very profitable for a mining company to mine gold. It's much more profitable to mine gold, say, than to mine copper. But the issue of gold is, of course, that we don't need any more gold. We have enough gold in the world. In fact, we have about 150 years of gold reserves in the world that can help us technologically. Coal mining is also a type of mining that, of course, we will not need anymore. So the kind of mining we will need are copper mining, lithium mining, which are much smaller scale mining. So we have to make sure that when we talk about mining, we talk about those types of mining. Nevertheless, the inclusion of local communities in the decision process of building these mines is very important. Many mining projects today in the United States are held up because mining companies do not properly engage with local tribes or communities, and therefore their projects get blocked in court. And there are many examples of that happening now in the United States. So one thing to do is to put the country in charge of their own mines instead of having a foreign company come mine. So, for example, Cobalt started a new company in Zambia called Cobalt Zambia, which is owned by the Zambians. And the first CEO is a woman, is the first ever CEO of a mining company in the entire Africa. So it's also about promoting this kind of equality in work around the world. So, as I mentioned, the big challenge with mining is that when the building of the mine starts, then the environmental assessments and community engagement starts. And we feel at Mineral X, our program, that this is too late, that mineral exploration should engage also human exploration of the areas that are there. That means that you can, in fact, avoid areas that, number one, are native lands or would lead to environmental destruction, as opposed to making a discovery on a native land and then trying to engage with the community. At that point, it would be too late. So the one things we do at Mineral X is to engage with local communities in Zambia and partner with Zambians to go talk to communities and essentially find out what their desires are, what they think about mining, what they think about a mining economy, and how that should, what kind of needs that they have in terms of hospitals or education, right? And so these are very important engagements that are done next to the exploration process. Another big engagement that, as an educator, I am involved with is education, obviously. is that the kind of AI and data science that we develop at Stanford and is used to make discoveries in Zambians is in fact given to the Zambians. And so we have a program in Zambia that gives scholarships to Zambian students to start a master's degree in data science and AI for mineral exploration. And then some the material will be taught by myself going there, let's say once a year. So these are also very important initiatives that I think need to happen in addition to more technology. So I hope to give you a good introduction to critical minerals, what the needs are, what the issues are, and the huge opportunities that are in front of us if we would just do it the right way. So thank you much for listening, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. So let's continue with the next presentation, and in this case I will continue in Spanish. Y vamos a dar paso en este caso a la profesora Alba Ávila. Voy a permitirme presentar a la profesora. Ella es investigadora multidisciplinaria con una formación académica que incluye un doctorado en filosofía de la Universidad de Cambridge y títulos de ingeniería eléctrica y física de la Universidad de los Andes. Sus áreas de especialización abarcan la caracterización eléctrica de nanomateriales mediante técnicas de microscopía y desarrollo de nuevas técnicas físico-químicas para evaluar la toxicidad, la teledetección de cuerpos de agua y el diseño electrónico a medida para tecnologías de bajo costo y la integración de nanomateriales en el ámbito de la sostenibilidad. Además, trabaja en el diseño y desarrollo de kits educativos para promover la enseñanza de la nanotecnología y la electrónica, involucrándose activamente en diferentes escenarios de divulgación con comunidades. En una era en la que la línea entre lo humano y lo tecnológico es cada vez más tenue, la doctora Ávila ha priorizado el uso de tecnología como herramienta de empoderamiento y visibilización de problemáticas y generación de datos útiles para el diseño de políticas públicas. Es profesora asociada del Departamento de Ingeniería Eléctrica y Electrónica de la Universidad de los Andes. Profesora Alba, bienvenida. Un gusto que nos acompañe en este espacio y ya puede iniciar.
Listo. Muchas gracias. Voy a compartir primero para ver que estamos bien. ¿Sí?
Perfecto, se ve perfecto.
Se ve bien, ¿sí? Bueno,
Sí, señora.
primero pues quisiera saludar a todos en español y a todas. Gracias pues a todo el equipo de Engage por organizar este evento. Creo que es necesario los diálogos interdisciplinarios y sobre todo que ponen los saberes desde nuestras profesiones. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm going to be mixing between Spanish and English. I always said that there are some connections to the emotions that these topics bring into our heart that must be expressed in our mother language. But certainly I will be missing both. I hope it's not a problem for most of you. So I'm going to give you a different perspective of the one that Jeff just introduced. This is going to be my modest reflection of something that I think has been on the table. I call it multi-hide and seek material versus energy storage. Sometimes we hide materials, sometimes we seek materials, and we are just playing on these rules of this child game. The content of my talk is going to be three sections: time critical events for the energy storage in Colombia, batteries and effective data and literacy, and three key messages that I want to share with you as a citizen, as an engineer, and as a physicist working in Colombia. Like any profession that we are practicing in our country actually somehow is related to many transitions that the country is facing. So I created a slide just to give you an overview that why we are talking about energy transition and energy storage. We started talking about this in 2012 through the Paris Agreement, where we decided as a community, 196 countries, to go through the reduction of the impact in the environment and the net zero emissions. But at that time in Colombia, we also created the first list of critical minerals. And I can give you all the references after the talk. And in 2015, we start having these government programs that started to discuss the decrees and the laws for the energy transition. And then we have several documents that I will strongly recommend if you want to understand the state of these transitions that sometimes I always discuss. They shouldn't be transitions, it's only transformations. Is ProEur, a document from the UTME that gives information about the perspective of what resources and technologies are needed. Also, we have the National Plan 2022-2052 that it came out between 2021 to 2022. And then we have a great tool that I strongly recommend from the generation industry that is called Synergiogs. It helps us to understand the demand and the resources in terms of the fossil energies and the green energy matrix. And then we have in 2023 the major event of having another list of critical materials. And then we have also the document that is creating the importance of a fair transition. And among those events, we also have other transitions that are correlated to the energy transition. And so we are in this macro project to have the metro in Bogota in 2018. We have the approval of the first line in 2023. Recently, we have the second line approval. But we also have the movement of the digital transition. So we have the EU, LATAM, and Caribbean Digital, that in 2023, it was an alliance that was signed to improve the two targets, to have a data center and a cybersecurity center in South America. One is going to be in Panama, and the other one is going to be in Colombia. And last month, there was an event, select event, and the Chilean government and Colombian government decided that they are going to go for the first AI model in Latin America. That's really important because it demands resources, it demands energy. In 2024, we also have the roadmap for the AI that was created by the Science and Innovation Minister in Colombia. And recently, we have the draft of the law that is there at the bottom of the screen. The first project is for the semiconductor and electronic industry in Colombia. So why I'm mentioning this is just to give you a picture of many transitions and technology movements that are all connected. Unfortunately, they are not connected in terms of discussing the minerals and materials and processing resources that we need to have Colombia as a capable and not vulnerable country dependent on other countries for these technologies. So this is a very promising, and maybe my message here is let's keep an eye on all the initiatives and also transitions that the government is working on to see how we can connect the gaps and bring the challenges into just one integral dialogue. So after that, I just want to show you one of the data that is in the national plan. This national plan, of course, try to create a prospective exercise or what are the technologies, and one of the technologies that you will notice in between the numbers 33 to 37 is electrochemical batteries. But the reports that should be our guidelines as a citizens have this kind of data that, of course, it means that everyone should read it and interpret. But I think it's quite tricky to look at the data. I'm gonna give you 1 or 2 minutes. Maybe you can give me, if you can give me in the chat, what is the message that you get from this data when you have all the technologies, but you don't visualize the minerals, and you don't talk about the packaging, you don't talk about the storage. So it's quite difficult to see how the mitigation to the climate change and the technology uncertainty are going to be the major decision criteria for supporting programs in Colombia. So if you look at that, all the electrochemical batteries are between, I mentioned already, is between 33 to 37. They are at the bottom right. So it means that the effort to mitigation is low, but the uncertainty is large. Of course, they think that this is one of the disruptive points that we need to work in order to have this sustainable energy transition. So my message here is make sure that when we create data, especially visualize data for others, that is useful and easy to read. So I mentioned the synergy tool, and this morning I said, oh, let's look at the other data, the data that comes from the generators. So this is what is reported there in terms of the biomass, eolic, and solar energy. And if you look at the scales or the graph at the bottom and the graph at the top, you will notice that there is a gap in the scale. So fossils and hydro are in the order of 200 to 200 gigawatt hour, but the other ones are in the order to 0 to 10 gigawatt hour. So if we start talking to the people who are in the offices, like the UPME, the CREC, the ministers, the energy minister, and you ask them, that's what I did to prepare this talk, how many projects, solar projects, oil projects deployed in Colombia today have considered the backup of the battery storage? And they told me none. So that's a concern, and I put it there. It's like it was the answer of one of the experts after a technical call. So having that in mind and having the data from the tool, the data report that there is 77% of renewable generation. And when I show it to the students, they are so happy because this is green. So they think that this is the green generation. But actually, this is adding everything. So if we just focus on solar, the average is 7.7 gigawatts hour per day. And if we translate that into megawatts, it's 323 megawatts per day. But the national demand per day is 1,500 megawatts. So it means that batteries are not always on the picture and are not always included. Of course, we have recently been informed that there are two projects, one by ERCO and the other one by Celsia, that claim to have or to already acquire like battery storage systems to be deployed in Cali, and the other one is in La Martina, with a capacity of 2 megawatts hour, and the other one 6.9 megawatts hour. I would love to show you this with the cost, but unfortunately that information is not publicly yet. And let's connect the data that we have. If we assume that in half a day, that is 12 hours of generation, we have 323 megawatts in 12 hours. It means that we'll have 3,876 megawatts hour. And if we have that in half a day in the morning, we want to translate it at night to be used in another activities or just to translate it. If we are going to use the capacity already deployed for storage, it means that it's too low. You probably noticed that we need more than 2,000 units with the capacity that they already got in between October and November. So what should we do? Shall we just concentrate on the positive data that shows that we have an increment on solar generation? Or shall we start questioning how are we going to keep this energy and not waste the energy that is generated, because we cannot transfer it into the storage and be more resilient on how to use it. So with this exercise in mind, so we start looking at what minerals are important for batteries. And I think it's important that we have a literacy in the country, just not at the stakeholders' offices. So if we go into the role of critical minerals, there's a report in Clean Energy Transitions by the IEA that was reported in 2021. We noticed that there are many, probably that you are familiar with. We need copper, cobalt, nickel, lithium, rare earth elements, chromium, zinc, and aluminium. Of course, when we look at that, there is a demand for high, moderate, and low. But remember that I mentioned it's not just energy, it's the digital transition. So we need to create better processors, a graphical microprocessor that will allow to diagnose and operate automatically all the solar and eolic systems deployed on field. So we also need semiconductors, minerals for the creation of these technologies. And the ones that, this is a table created by the Critical Mineral Security Program. So when the ones in risk are gallium, palladium, germanium, and silicon. Of course, we also need cobalt, copper, arsenic, titanium, fluorine, phosphorus, iridium. And if you have the chance to go into the La Agencia Nacional and you want to see how is the participation of Colombian having access to these public resources is none, or is very, very limited. So I'm showing this because critical means that we are in a fragile region to be dependent, not just in terms of the energy, but the digital transition too. So having this in mind is when I decided that it's important to create a course and create materials and data. And I'm going to give you an example of people to understand what is a battery, what are the components of a battery, what are the mechanisms, physical mechanisms that allowed the transformation of electrochemical energy into useful energy. So this is part of one of the papers that we have come up with, just to have the different mechanisms in the cathode, the intercalation, polymer compounds, Prussian blue analogies, spinel conversion, what happening to the electrolyte and the separator, and then what happens in the anode in order to differentiate the charge for the ions and the electrons, intercalation, the charge, alloy and conversion. And what we want the students to be trained on is to understand that there are different criteria in terms of materials that are going to be selected by the structure, by processing performance, properties of sustainability. And then in terms of sustainability is really a key that we look at destruction is A in this graph, B is destruction and the processing, and C is the commercialization. We look at here the ions, the important ions for the development of batteries today: aluminium, bismuth, cadmium, chromium, cobalt, copper, germanium, graphite, iron, lithium, magnesium, nickel, silicon, silver, sulfur, titanium, vanadium, zinc with different colors. And you also notice the logo of the different companies that are commercializing batteries. And just looking at the picture, I hope you realize that Colombia is in a very fragile scenario. So we are not in the planning of discovering new resources, but we are also not extracting, but certainly we are not commercializing either. But it doesn't mean, and I want to send this message to you, that all the deployed battery capacity that the different transitions are bringing into the country cannot be reused. And maybe after this talk, you are thinking, I need to create a company that maybe use already these different circular usability of the batteries in different lifetimes. Like the cats, they have 7 lives. Batteries should have more than 3 in different industrial sectors. And this is something that we have to explore here. So this is the scenario, and I'm presenting it to you because this is these are the graphs that I'm expecting the stakeholders creating the different reports we deploy to any citizen in Colombia. So we need to really be informed, not just about what is the generation, what are the different companies bringing into the country, but also what is the lacking of resources that we have and the capacity to be part of the economical supply chain. So with this in mind, that we decided it's important that sustainability will be connected to properties. So in this kind of visualization of data, we have again the elements, and we have the abundance per in the air crores, ppm, by moles in the air crores. We have the 2 properties that we consider important for these applications: electrical conductivity and the joint modulus. Then we have the cost per 100 grams, and the color will indicate the scale, whether we are at the high or low scale. So in this case, it will help us to see what are the abundant elements that we can also explore, maybe in this reuse and recycle of these materials. We also think that it's important that in terms of the anodes and cathodes, we look at what is commercially available, but what are the research status in terms of the capacity. And you probably notice here for the different, in this specific slide, we have 7 iron: lithium, sodium, potassium, zinc, calcium, and magnesium. And even though there has been an effort to improve the capacity and including nanomaterials, you see that there hasn't been a very, very large improvement. So we really need to continue the funding in the country to explore other approaches. Of course, we can rely on natural resources, but we also have to look at new ways of searching for resources. So I'll give you here 3 examples for the largest projects that are looking into batteries. One is the Big Mac project. This Big Mac project is looking at the battery for 2030, and it's called is how are we going to use artificial intelligence and macro databases to understand the correlations between properties and performance, and maybe to suggest other more sustainable materials. The other one is the genome of the materials that aims to compile technical data about renewable batteries in many regions in the world. And I strongly suggest that you will check it because it includes experimental data as well as theoretical data. It analyzes from battery markers and analyze to create more efficient breakthroughs in the renewable battery space and global energy sector. And the last project listed there is the Energía Power Lab. It's a living lab tested bed that consists of the grid constituted by AC and DC and hybrid microgrids, able to emulate different energetic scenarios and validate topological solutions, control and protection strategies and devices. So here is important because the participants come from the generation, storage, and regenerative sectors. So it's important that these tools are available for us and maybe could be included also in all the documents that we are creating in Colombia. So with that, these are my final thoughts. So I show you that the country is rich in initiatives, and those are fragmented. Unfortunately, I don't see any connection in that. So my first message, each energy transition is an essential part of the ongoing transitions, or transformations is the word that I prefer. And I invite everyone to stop thinking on the silo corner. So every time I go to these technical committees, it's like everyone is looking, oh, digital, we need computational resources and capacity. And then energy is looking for other type of capacity. And then we have the social and the fair initiative established by the government. But it seems that there is no one metric that will join all these efforts. The other one is communities should evaluate and question the trace of the data. Like I showed you the first example of this uncertainty in technology and the mitigation of the climate change is how we can read that, how we can make decisions of that. So in terms of battery, the question should challenge the actions and decisions that value larger battery packs with increased cell capacity versus battery designs for resilience versus cost versus the 3 R's for sustainability: reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling. And this is particularly important. I'm going to mention 3 examples. When I travel to Chocó, when I go to the Amazon, or go to La Guajira, I can see the solar projects there. But I can see also the lack of understanding of the environmental conditions there. So the degradation of the life cycle of a battery in high humidity and high temperature sometimes is not considered into the design phase of the project. So these really intensive environmental conditions could change the whole life cycle for these batteries. And my last message is we are lost if we no longer seek for upstream battery mineral exploration. I would really love to see any efforts in Colombia for discovering the critical minerals. And batteries must be the core of the calls for research projects. If you have the chance to look at in the Science and Innovation Minister, there is one call that was recently published, and I'm going to give you the number of the convocatoria. Convocatoria 958 is the transformation of the mining, planning, and energy for the territorial convergence and transition and fair transition. And if you go into and you look at the different I would say research topics: abastecimiento energético confiable y diversificación, innovación tecnológica y transformación digital, adaptación al cambio climático, planificación enfocada al desarrollo sostenible. There is one mention to energy storage and batteries. It's only the recycling of smart materials. So it is important that we bring the attention into the stakeholders and decision makers that batteries are the heart of this sustainability of these new green technologies. And the other one, we need a fair energy transition, demand the publics of the update data that everyone can understand, not just for batteries, but for the packaging of batteries and for the technologies they rely on. Either they could be produced domestically or imported, and it has to target the utility and the macro projects and the residential scale. So that was my last message, and this is a sentence I always mention in all my classes. Recently, I started teaching these resources and hide and seek minerals and energy. Understanding battery dependence encouraged not only the responsible use of energy, but also the need to reinvent it or to advance without it. But if you look at the data that I showed you in terms of the projects in Colombia, it's really risky to advance without it. Thank you so much. Gracias, espero que haya sido claro.
Profesora Alba, muchísimas gracias por la presentación. Y bueno, vamos a continuar entonces con la conversación, con la discusión. Y para este espacio vamos a dar paso a V. Martins, quien va a ser el moderador del día de hoy. Me voy a permitir presentar a V. Y es investigador titular A en el Centro de Geociencias de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, es ingeniero geólogo de la Universidad Nacional de Colombia y doctor en Ciencias Geológicas de la Universidad de Stanford, donde se especializó en la evolución geológica del bloque Maya en Centroamérica. Su investigación abarca el fechamiento de uranio-plomo, procedencia sedimentaria y reconstrucción paleogeográfica de México, Centroamérica y los Andes del Norte. Ha tenido una extensa producción científica y, bueno, tiene asesora a varios estudiantes de posgrado. Entonces, Uwe, gracias por acompañarnos y continuemos con la presentación. Si te parece, continuamos en inglés. Gracias.
Yeah. All right. So I'm looking at the various questions here. Let me just ask real quick. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let us start with this question. What are successful examples of social acceptance of drilling in low country or low income countries? I guess this question is for Jeff. So what is the experience in Zambia regarding the acceptance of this drilling project that was undertaken there? Did people accept it, or were they very hesitant or opposed initially to the drilling?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And worldwide, this is a big problem, and the question was indeed worldwide. But I don't have. I mean, I'm academic. I'm involved with the company, and I do have the experience with Zambia, so I can talk from that experience. In Zambia, there was lots of initiatives around asking people about mining, and one of the things that came up continuously is that people are not very well informed about what is mining and what is being mined and what is it for. So it's just the basic questions of people not knowing what is going on. And so the first important aspect, therefore, is information and continuous information sharing with people. For example, we spoke with people who said that mining companies came and they dug a few holes in their backyard and drilled a few wells and then just disappeared and never came back or never said anything. And so they don't understand, right? But what the company did probably was acquire data and discovered that there was not much of anything to be there and never went back. So the first step would be this continuous sharing of information. Then if you talk to Zambians, they are maybe surprisingly a bit, they are quite pro mining for their country. I think they see mining as a big step forward out of the debt situation that the country is in. There is, from the cobalt point of view, there is a continuous community engagement around near the area of Mingomba. What are the needs of communities? And so one of the big needs are just access to electricity or hospitals or schools. And so the company is engaged in doing exactly that, is putting Zambians in charge of the operations. I mentioned the CEO is directly from Zambia, as well as some other leaders, and thereby actually building schools in the environment near where we are drilling. But this is not an easy thing, and it's just building schools is just one thing, and just giving scholarships to students is only one thing. I think the challenge is for the companies is the continuous information stream and the continuous consent that people provide to continuing on this path, and that is a relationship that needs to be done with the people. Also, there has to be a lot learned from the people themselves, the land that they have been living on for a very long time. So it's not just a one-way conversation, it's definitely a two-way conversation. Other challenges that I can mention is that the question we came out with was also who is really representing people. And if you go to Zambia, there are chiefs that are apparently owning very large amounts of lands. And so it's not really that you talk to the local community and say, can we get your approval? You actually have to go to the chief and get his approval. And so that also sets itself up for people being advantage of. And so it's not a simple issue, I think, in that sense. And so needing to deal with the structure of the country itself is something that is challenging.
Thank you, Jeff. Continuing with this topic, specifically the topic of providing people with information and educating people for them to actually make a sound decision, I wanted to ask Alba regarding or this question. Why is it that in all of these reports that you mentioned, batteries are nowhere to be seen? Why do you think there's a lack of education also in the sector of people that are making decisions in Colombia? Is there a lack of education regarding batteries?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer, but I have another question for Jeff regarding the question that
Alba, I'll be asking the questions. Okay, so if you could write down the question in the chat, that would be great.
I will write it down. Yeah, and I'm just going to connect the two questions that you just expressed. My concern in Colombia is that people who are creating these reports are creating different narratives, yeah? And it happens not in Colombia, it happens in all Latin America. So we have a story to tell, and we want just to use some data from external databases, but sometimes we don't create our own data. And for me, this is the most scary part. Batteries should be part of any literacy program, or any citizen use a battery in their cell phones so they can somehow get the idea of the metrics that are required for the other projects. And you mentioned the communities. Jeff mentioned the communities in Zambia. Same happened here in La Guajira and Amazon. We have to deal with the leader of the community, who is the one who is going to transfer the knowledge to the other members, but those members are the users. So my concern right now with the picture that I showed you, those are the projects that brought the batteries just a month ago. So I don't think those are already connected. I'm going to visit this installation in Celsia, because I want to know the capacity and the cost. Because in terms of what the energy that we have to transfer, that will give us the budget that these companies need to be committed to. So I would love to see a workshop where the stakeholders have discussions in terms of the technicality of the batteries and energy storage, metrics, indicators, and our own data. And this is the lack of information. I would say some people maybe have an engineering background, but they have not taken the long-term knowledge required to keep updating the technical backgrounds. I think as a physicist, I love always to use physics and maths to bring this into the discussion. For me, when I got the two news from the UCME about these amazing battery projects, and then I showed the gap, and they say, oh, maybe we have to go and see if they are going to expand this battery storage project. So for me, it's a lack of knowledge, but it's a lack of motivation to use the proper technical data for these kind of discussions, especially reports that are going to be part of the history and should be part of any educational program in the electrical and electronic engineering. As I'm part of, we read and we criticize this data. Actually, like even for the mining sector, I think we don't have the data that should be part of any introductory class in the engineering school. That's my worry also about. We used to have updated data until probably 2023, but from there there is a gap.
Okay, thank you, Alba. One of the questions that we have from the audience is the following. How can we teach the general public to appreciate the importance of critical minerals? And this question is for the both of you. What can we do to educate people regarding critical minerals and batteries?
Yeah, happy to start with that. It's an excellent question. You know, just myself, until 5 years ago, I was not really aware of this issue. I was working in several areas of earth resources. And so I think a key issue is around that people are very divorced from where the material comes from the things they use every day. Right? If I say I have a cell phone, I ask that in my students, what's in your cell phone and where does it come from? Right? And then for most students, it seems like, why is that a question? Right? Doesn't it come from Apple? You know, well, yeah, Apple doesn't make you lithium. And so, first of all, I think they're educationally, we have been tending to educate students in individual disciplines. Right? We do electrical engineering and we do mining engineering and we do psychology. So increasingly, we need to start educating, and this, I think what Alba is also going towards, is educating people around the challenges of today, which are integrated, comprehensive challenges that require multiple disciplines to start looking at. And so next to these individual classes or teaching at schools and university, more and more teaching around what the challenges are. And also that part of that challenge is this circularity of material. I would, you know, and so circular economy, but I'm not a big believer of that, but at least that materials can be recycled. But I'd start to understand where does the material come from? How much do we need? Where does it go into? Where is it processed? Where is it manufactured? Where is it eventually recycled? And so that whole life cycle, teaching that whole life cycle, either in high schools or university, is actually just starting out. And it's something that definitely needs to be done. And I'm sure that Alba agrees with me on that one.
Yeah, I do agree. I teach the introductory class of material engineering for the engineering school. And I ask the students to create the poster of any device or any electronic system they have, where they come from. And actually, we need to bring the geopolitical aspect here, because, you know, Colombia used to think that social conflict is different to the technology advancement. But nowadays, when we look at the situation, the current situation, in terms of what is happening in China and Russia, or what happened with the COVID. So I just want to give you an example that I use in my class. The mineral resources that comes from Ukraine are really important for this digital advancement. They include titanium, lithium, beryllium, manganese, gallium, uranium, zirconium, graphite, fluoride, and nickel. So even though Ukraine is in the middle of the conflict, so they have a lot of reserves. So somehow we have to be attentive of what is going in there. So we don't have to be scared about the conflict. Conflict is going to be part of this new revolution of technologies that depend, and how the diplomacy will play a role in order to bring resources from one country to the other one. And students need to know about the ND gain index too, even though we are in the engineering field. So understanding the vulnerability and readiness in terms of technology has created a metric for the decision making on which trading are you going to go for. So in terms of correction, in terms of conflict, yeah, I always mention to the students because they want to have the perfect scenario, and I say perfect scenario has never happened. Computers are with us because we have the First and Second World War. We have the GPAs after a war. So right now, I'm not saying that the wars are the only resource, but we are facing it right now. So it has to be more opportunities coming from that, and especially with resilience technologies. And these have to be like cases. I would love to develop a book that will study the different cases that we have across Latin America to understand the importance of not invisibilizing materials. Sometimes people like to have things in their hands, but not understanding where they come from creates this vague idea that there are infinite and unlimited resources. Yeah, and especially that the politicians that are on the presidential house and all the ministers are not part of these developments. Sometimes in Colombia, I notice in different regions when I go to the Amazon or the border with Venezuela, which is a really chaotic there, they think safety is a priority, but safety comes as a result of the illegal mining, and they develop very innovative techniques for illegal mining on the rivers for gold, but they don't realize that gold is in the cell phone and gold is in the computer. So there has to be a connection between cause and consequences.
Thank you, Alba. That's a very good insight. We have a question here from David Torres regarding storage, energy storage and batteries. You have given us a panorama of the situation in Colombia, but would you be willing to give us a few words regarding the panorama on a global scale, energy storage and batteries on a global scale?
Well,
what is the use, and what do you guys know about this?
I think I will pass the microphone to Jeff.
Okay, no. So it's an interesting space which is different from batteries for vehicles. So in batteries for vehicles, you need lithium because lithium is light. You need lots of energy density, meaning you need to be able to move your car fast enough and you need to move your car long enough. So storage capacity. So for that, the chemists have figured out that nickel cobalt in combination with lithium is the most efficient battery. And so, of course, nickel and cobalt, particularly cobalt, is a problem element. So people have started to work on alternatives to lithium lithium nickel cobalt, and so lithium iron phosphate batteries. So these are the most electrical vehicles have that now. These are still quite expensive batteries. And so in order to have less expensive batteries for storage, where you store intermittent solar and wind energy, you will typically gravitate towards sodium ion batteries, so table salt, basically, right? So sodium cannot be used for cars. It's way too heavy. It also catches fire easily. And so sodium is really good for storage. Now, what's also good for storage are used lithium batteries from cars. So once your car, I have an electrical vehicle, once I have that vehicle for 10 years, the battery degrades to only 80% efficiency, but that efficiency is still very good for storage. So even that battery that I bought 5 years ago is still going to be used probably until 2040 before it needs recycling. So we're way not in the recycling. So what we're seeing around the world is the combination of grid storage in batteries with wind and solar. In California, for example, we're now seeing that there is an excess capacity of solar during the day that is stored in batteries. And then once it hits 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, the batteries kick in and we have another 4 hours of energy. And those are the most big energy consumptions, right? This is what you're doing in the evening. So where the world is going is to increase the length of this storage capacity from 4 hours potentially to 8 hours, and people now are thinking about 12 hours, so that you can actually store several days of capacity eventually, and so you do not need anymore rely on what we now still rely on in California is natural gas as a fossil fuel that can be burned. I saw some people, and the last comment I make is some people talk about hydrogen. And so hydrogen, I think the world and the industry and scientists are starting to agree that hydrogen as a fuel is not going to happen. And that is because it just costs a lot more to store than wind energy. And it costs a lot more to move around. And it is also very flammable, and it's a very small molecule, very corrosive. So people are going to move forwards towards using hydrogen as a chemical, such as in ammonia. And I think that's what we see around the world, is that the combination of wind, solar, and batteries becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper up to the point they are much cheaper than fossil fuels. And then the world will then transform completely. And I think that's the path that we are on today.
Thank you, Jeff. Here's a question by Juan Esteban Fonseca. He would like to know how Colombia could actually play a role regarding the exploration and the distribution of critical minerals. Alba presented a very interesting world map in which Colombia was grayed out and didn't play any role. What is Colombia's potential? Maybe if Alba wants to start.
So the opportunity that I have spot is we got this interest of Celsia and ERCO, and there is another project in Barranquilla and Santa Marta that already imported batteries. And we also have a large number of electrical vehicles. Number is increasing month by month. We also have at least, let's say, 5 different electronic gadgets per person. So you have like your computer, 2 computers, probably a tablet and cell phone. So the opportunity I envision is how are we going to complement one battery technology to bring it into another sector? Because as I mentioned, most of the technologies want to have 3 life cycles for the batteries, but actually when you have an automation system, you need the sleeping phase is the longest time that you need to feed the system with power. So for all these old batteries, those could be part of this backup system, but we need to somehow run to have our own hardware and software to diagnose the state of health of those batteries. Right now, the capacity in Colombia, at least for electric vehicles, is just focused on the concessionaires, the main sellers of the vehicles. We don't have the local workshops as we do with the other traditional cars. So they have the hardware to test the battery, but we need more of these resilient technologies that we develop in Colombia. So if one of you want to use like all the information from the databases of the vehicles that we have in Colombia in order to create the prediction of the different failures for the batteries that will come out from the first cycle of use and go into another one, that will be fantastic. And we know that in our continent, we love to exchange goods. Cell phones from Colombia go to Peru, and we also do it with cars. And actually, I think it's going to happen with the whole solar infrastructure. So I think having these local sellers and local technicians that will be able to come up with new ways of diagnose and operate and check the status of the battery, that will be fantastic. Because right now, all of this is as imported technology. So I advise any students who are willing to develop testing of batteries systems to come to Uniandes and work with us, so we can create the new electronics for that. Also, with the artificial intelligence models and techniques with Sinfonia, we can also create these predictive models. In our department, we have databases for the Nissan car and for the Renault car for more than 5 years. And we have been classifying the different failures of the batteries. And I know SOFASA, para los que quieran, I'm going to say this part in English, part in Spanish. SOFASA, una de las que pues monta los carros, tiene un laboratorio que sería muy importante que los estudiantes hagan pasantías. So we have this workshop in Medellin, and they have one, I would say, a specialized battery lab. If you want to go for internships, that would be fantastic. Unfortunately, there is no one universal battery, and I don't think people wouldn't like that would work in different sectors, but somehow we need to create a platform that will allow to connect the different technologies for one sector. That's the way I envision it.
Okay, thank you, Alba. Regarding Colombia's potential, and going back to copper, which was a main point of Jeff's presentation, Chile is the main producer in the world. Peru is a very important producer in the world. Ecuador and Colombia have a very similar geologic environment, but they have a very different weather, a very different climate. The areas where copper could be mined in Colombia are rainforests. How do you envision, Jeff, the exploration and the extraction of copper in these areas that are probably environmentally more fragile than a desert in Chile, such as Colombia?
Yeah, a desert in Chile is certainly has its different fragility, which is the lack of water instead of too much water. So no, this is a very good question, and we work with a company called Eurocopper. They operate in Brazil, and so there are, of course, lots of opportunities to do exploration in the Amazon or outside the Amazon. And it's interesting if you think about the rainforest in Brazil. There is a competition that is going in between number one is agriculture and the other one is mining. And so if you think about what Brazilians are trying to do is number one is agriculture is the most destructive one, because you just cut down vast amounts of areas and you put soybeans in it, right? Or palm oil or something like that. So that gets exported. So that creates a completely devastation of the ecosystem, etc. What mining companies, however, do is, or are asked to do, is buy very large swaths of land around their mine and call them conservation, right? So that means that those pieces of lands cannot be touched by anybody. So that is one way that mining operates different from the agriculture. However, there are a number of challenges. If you are going to do gold mining, this is a huge problem. So gold mining in the rainforest, we know in Brazil, is using mercury. Mercury gets in the rivers, and the babies, 20% of the babies have mercury in their system. Right? So this is bad. That's bad number one. Bad number two is that once you go in with a road that you build as a company, you're building access to the forest. And so that brings in all kind of other actors into the forest that are potentially devastating the area. And I think, so in the end, it comes back again to the grade of the deposit. The company that we work with, Eurocopper, is not looking for, we call, porphyry copper deposits, which you find in Chile. These are gigantic plumes with 0.5% copper. So with that company, we're looking for called massive sulfide deposits, copper sulfide, that are in very limited intrusions in the earth that are probably only 1 to 2 kilometers long, and that have very high concentration of copper. So again, I think we have to balance many needs here. One thing that we are doing is offering the company Copper trade-offs between, number one, we want to investigate where, of course, are the native communities, where are ecologically sensitive areas, and using that information as a map to go into our mineral exploration such that we would avoid suggesting areas for exploration licenses that would be considered too sensitive or too devastating. So we're starting right away from the exploration point of view, not from let's discover something and then worry about the communities.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of the and allowing a company some trade-offs, I think, helps the company instead of pushing them in one direction and saying you're gonna have to mind this, but you have to deal with the people around it. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking right now.
Okay, thank you. Alba, I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask Jeff the question about the ND gain index, if you would like. I see it here on our chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This is important also for the students who are participants of this session. So Jeff, in one of the technical committees, some people from the social sciences, they were discussing about the ND gain matrix that rank the countries according to their vulnerability for corruption, but also the, let's say, the level of development of the country. And one concern that they express is the fact that cobalt is another of these essential and critical minerals that are in areas that are highly recognized by this high corruption index. So I just wonder if the companies that you mentioned that are thinking about the drilling, the owners of these companies and the governments are taking into account these indicators that keep the social political status, I would say, of the country, not just the mineral resources. If you can comment on that, thank you.
Yeah, no, excellent point. I think I want to go across the border of Zambia where the situation is much, much worse. And that is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so what has happened is the cobalt actually is found in the Congo, not in Zambia. And so this rush for cobalt, which is much rarer than copper, was a big issue and created a lot of corruption and artisanal mining. And so you have very large amounts of populations that are engaging in artisanal mining, in particular, of course, women, and then women bring their children. And so cobalt and these sulfide materials are toxic and has a lot of problems. But what the bigger problem is that the West doesn't recognize. The West goes in and says, well, we work with Glencore, a big mining company, and we don't do artisanal mining. We just mine our regular mines, and we have oversight over those regular mines. But what happens is that, of course, once you discover regular mines, people know next door to the regular mines where the cobalt is. And then you get a whole system where you have middle persons who become the off-taker of the cobalt of the people who are artisanal mining and then selling it to the companies while it's being exported. So in other ways, you have a whole system that's being set up where Western countries say we're not mining anything artisanal, but it's actually the regular mining that motivates the artisanal mining, and artisanal mining is completely unregulated. And so one of the challenges around this is how do you address the situation, right? And so one way to not address the situation is to say ban all artisanal mining today, right? Because that's going to take away the jobs of real people earning real money. And so there's a lot of sort of thinking in the social sciences around should we elevate artisanal mining to a level that it has safety, that it has healthcare, that there's education associated with it, instead of saying, let's just ban everything and just do nothing. I think that is a problematic thing for these communities. We had actually Stanford 2 weeks ago, representatives of those artisanal mining communities come in, and they said exactly the same. They said, we know the land better than the mining companies. We know what coal is. We know how to dig it out of the ground. But what we don't get is the opportunities to do it safely, to have education, to have healthcare in the areas that we live, and we get exploited by people within the country to do that. And so they're not asking to remove artisanal mining. They're asking to provide them with the right means to earn their own money based on a safe healthcare standard that we in the West would appreciate. So it's a very complex issue.
Actually, there is coltan mining in Colombia, niobium and tantalum. So one of the questions that I guess one of the students is asking here, how can we do smarter mining of coltan? And how could we use artificial intelligence for the exploration of niobium and tantalum? I understand that coltan is also quite abundant in the Democratic Republic of Congo, isn't it?
Yeah, so for these rare earth elements, the problem lies more in their processing. And that's why they also call rare earth elements, is that they're hard to extract from the rock because of the small proportions. And so when you talk about the processing, there is a technological issue that most of the know-how today is in China. And then secondly, that the costs of doing this low is also in China. And that's because of China doesn't have environmental regulation as we have here in the United States. So there's driving forces in a rare earth element that have more to do with the mineral processing itself than the mining. Regarding the mining, I think the concern with rare earth element will be the presence of uranium or any other byproduct that may make the water local hydrology toxic to those elements. But I think it's really about the processing that is the bottleneck for the rare earth elements.
Okay, great. So changing gears a little bit, there are a few questions here regarding how to build trust with communities. How to build trust, or how can the industry or government actually build trust in communities where mining is conducted? What lessons are you aware about?
Well, the lessons, I think, are about continuous information and continuous consent. It's not a one-time deal. It's not like we're going to make a deal with people. So this means a regular, continued engagement. And this is the problem. It's not that mining companies don't want to do this. Of course, they want to engage with communities, but they do not have the capacity in-house. If you're Rio Tinto, you operate many, many mines around the world. And maintaining relationships with everybody around the world is an extremely difficult thing to do. And it's not necessarily a priority for a company. And so in that way, they may be doing the minimum possible rather than doing this continuous engagement. And I think that is going to be essential, and it's going to take a change of minds in the companies, that they really need to prioritize this and full-hearted and not just at certain occasions.
Thanks, Jeff. Alba, here's a question that is perhaps a little better suited for you, and it regards energy security and energy storage. And Jeff mentioned that probably the future is in utilizing sodium instead of lithium. Are you in your research group, Alba, doing any work on sodium rather than lithium batteries?
No, right now we are not fabricating batteries. We are just analyzing the data that is in the databases to understand the capacity and abundance, as I show on the graphs. But we are not doing research on batteries. We analyze data.
Okay, perfect. And what future do you envision for these sodium batteries? I mean, sodium is an extremely abundant mineral in the Earth's crust. I don't think it would be a challenge to find any suitable sodium source that is, easy to where the sodium is easy to extract and the conditions are more or less ideal. What do you two think about this?
In the research we did, it was the sodium in the anodes include pure sodium metal intercalation, and it has been used since they reported a large specific capacity of 1,100 milliamps hour gram, and a voltage of 2.2 volts. So because we notice the abundance is another opportunity that we have. The development of these metal anodes are not new. They started in the 1960s using liquid sodium in batteries that work at high temperatures like 573 Kelvin. These batteries had efficiencies reported of 87%. And but they require an external energy source to control the high operating temperature, causing high manufacturing costs and safety issues. So that's the concept that we have. Definitely, I think is one that we have to compare to lithium in terms of the number of life cycles, and especially the other metrics that will establish the overcharging, over discharging rates. So those are the ones that we are looking right now.
Okay, great. There was a graph, Jeff, where you showed how over time the grade of the ore, of the copper ore that has been used for mining operations is decreasing. I think it was from 4% to 0.5% in about 100 years.
Yeah.
Is this a trend that you see in other elements or other minerals?
Absolutely, you see it everywhere. And it simply has to do with the fact that mining companies tend to continue mining what they have. It's just cheaper to do that. Actually, it's cheaper than closing the mine, because closing the mine is expensive. You have to then, terminate and all these operations, and so they continuously continue to try to mine, because making discoveries has become harder and harder. And so typically when you make a deposit, a discovery, you mine the high grade areas first, and then you'd go down to the lower grade areas. And so that's what's happening now in the world, as we are lacking major discoveries, and that is true for all of these different areas, different minerals.
Okay, so this is a little bit worrisome, apparently.
Yeah, well, it makes it more destructive, right? I think people. I also started to realize that we shouldn't blame necessarily the mining companies or the mining industry too much at all. It is that suddenly over the last 10 years, after Tesla started making cars that actually could be reasonably priced and drive, and other companies started doing that, suddenly we started to realize we needed these amount of materials, and we're needing them in a way that is setting us up in a completely new era of material science and minerals that we have never seen in the human history. It's almost like the beginning of the oil industry in the early 1900s. So we're having to reinvent the whole industry. So what's not going to work is to have the current industry do the same thing. That's not going to work. So we're going to have to reinvent this industry. I think companies like Cobalt Metals are sort of signs that there are ways to be able to do that in certain ways. I think new investments needing to be coming into this mining world. International collaborations are going to come in, like we had on oil and gas. We're going to have international collaborations, which you're already seeing between the United States and Australia and Canada. fair trade agreements between Chile and Peru and the United States. So we're going to see, this is just ramping up today, and this is a slow process. As I mentioned, I was involved in a mine planning yesterday, and they need to grind the ore to pieces, and to build that mill. It's 3 years of time that it takes to build just one mill for one mine to just grind ore. So you can imagine how slow this process is going to be. This transition, it's going to take a lot of time, and so that means there is time to do it the right way.
Okay, so we still have time perhaps for one or two additional questions. One here is rather interesting, and it is for Alba. Alba, what do you think energy storage technology, what impact could it have to provide reliable electricity in remote areas and rural communities and in Colombia?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the biggest challenge I have experienced in the rural areas is the hazard of the high humidity and high temperature. And especially these areas, I mentioned one of the projects. The project from Celsia is 128 tons, is the weight of the 120 packages of batteries that they brought into the country. Imagine moving that into the Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
You only get that by the river or by the air. So there is not going to be an airplane. So it's going to be a lot of, I would say, contaminants going into the transport of these containers. So that's one of the biggest challenge. And the other one is batteries degrade with temperature. And so you might have to adapt these containers to keep certain temperature to improve the efficiency of the batteries. So it means that you need to introduce more energy to bring energy. So somehow there has to be a leverage in the equation that just keeping the batteries in these territories would then be more costly than the energy that you are storing and the uses of that energy that has to be essential for those communities. So I'm going to comment on the previous question that you asked. And with this one, just to express my last reflection. In Colombia, I have been discussing what is critical and what is essential. It means that there are different drivers in the community to come up with plans for essential and critical. One approach is that essential is essential to protect any human life activity. Anything that will be sensitive to the life protection should be essential in terms of the resources for those technologies. And to be honest, I have seen these communities living for 100 years without any energy transition. So somehow they learn how to use the natural resources, and maybe just bringing these new technologies are not necessary. At some point, as I said, we have to advance without the new technologies if the humans have learned to adapt to their environments. In terms of solar in the Amazon, I have seen solar panels as a table for dining or as a table for playing, because the protection layer for the panel has degraded, so the efficiency just goes down, and they don't know what to do with that, because we only introduce technologies, but we never teach them what is the cycle to remove those technologies from the territory. So one of my concern is, are we just dropping waste that no one is going to be responsible of taking it out and not evaluating the impact of those technologies there. If you look at in Google, there are pictures of one of the workshops I participated to run as I would say a sensible workshop for indigenous communities to collect all the electronic waste that is in the communities, and just to introduce them of the importance that those components and materials shouldn't be dropped close to the river and close to the sensitive areas where they are planting their food. So I think there is a lack of information for these communities on the consequences of the materials and technologies that we are deploying in the territory.
Okay, thank you. We are about to close this session, but before we do so, we would like to ask each of you speakers if you could maybe provide a short message to the younger generations of geoscientists regarding the future of batteries, battery storage, and the future of the application of artificial intelligence in a more sound exploration and exploitation of minerals. Maybe
Okay,
Albai.
okay, Alba, go first. Yeah.
Okay, sure, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah. Alba, you're still muted.
Yeah, my message is there hasn't been another time in history that you are probably studying at the university and you have survived a pandemic. And there hasn't been other time in our life history that we have at least 4 transitions going on in this country. And also the challenge of the current party that doesn't believe always in science and engineering. So thinking about this scenario, you probably are going to realize that you are creating a new profession in Colombia, that you have to be part of the stakeholders committee, technical committees, write blogs, make TikToks, videos whenever you see a project that is not working. I always advise my students to go into these amazing creative skills that we have. Around this campus, I always have someone who is collecting metals and metal alloys. And this guy is not educated, but I'm not saying it in a negative way. I'm just saying that he has developed one skill to differentiate the ferrous alloys from the non-ferrous alloys. And that is part of our culture, being creative using just a single magnet. And he understands what is the economical benefit from the waste. So that has to happen in terms of batteries. We have many batteries in the cell phones. We have many batteries in the biomedical sector. We have many batteries in all the electronic gadgets. And we have also batteries in this energy sector and digital sector, because we are thinking about all the processing and the AI languages that we are gonna create. So engineering is the discipline that is going to provide the technical vision for all the decision making in Colombia. So if you are in the engineering profession, make sure everything you learn, you put it to the service of our communities. I used to be nanotechnologist, and I worked at cryogenic temperatures a long time ago. And then it was a specific lab with a very expensive infrastructure. It was fun, but it's more fun to serve to my people. And that changed completely the scenario of social engineering with a very fine and sharp technical background. So batteries are going to be the heart, and open any companies and any workshops that will provide the services, technical services and professional services for the sectors that the countries rely on. If you don't create those workshops, everything is going to be imported, even human resources, and we don't want that.
Thank you, Alba. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, wow, I can hard to follow that one. I think I'd like to maybe go back to when I started going to college a long time ago. You know, at that time, we're doing geosciences, you were doing petroleum engineering or reservoir or characterization. Most of the people who graduated from a engineering or geosciences degree went to work for an oil company. And at that time, this was late 90s or beginning 90s, there was no talk about climate change or energy transition. And so now you are now the transformation generation, let's call it like that, where the geosciences are going to be central to this transformation. And that's something a lot of people actually don't realize. People think batteries are essential, and that's true. But we know already how a battery works. We know how to make it. We just don't know where the material is going to come from, how we're going to get it out of the ground, and how we're going to do this sustainably. So I highly recommend continuing in your geoscience education and looking in particular into energy transition applications. And also, I found that making combinations of disciplines is very important. For example, you could do geoscience, but you can also add environmental science and social science. Or you can do geoscience and you can add computer science. And so all these things are now available to you, and they were not available to me or to Uwe, which I, remember from Stanford way back. So this is you have a chance to transform what was done wrong, partly by my generation and my parents' generation, and that is taking no actions on climate change. And so this is now your opportunity to do it, and it's a great opportunity. I'm part of that now, maybe for another 10 years, and then I just give the hat to those that follow, and I'm very confident this new generation will pull it off. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much, Alba, as well. Also to all the participants in this opportunity. And well, I'll give it back to you, Luis Felipe.
Thank you, and we want to hear your message for the next generations. Please share it with us.
But the message for the next generation regarding these topics. Okay. I think it is essential that we create conditions in Latin America to actually produce technology and produce science. For that, we need to work very hard to have very high educational standards. And one of the missions that you will have, which is very hard, is you will have to educate our politicians. Alba mentioned something very briefly regarding the party in power in Colombia and the fact that they distrust or partly distrust science. And I don't think Jeff is in a different boat with the next government that is soon to start in the United States. So continue studying extremely hard and try as hard as possible to educate everyone around you. Thank you, Luis Felipe.
Thank you, Uwe, Alba, Jeff. Thank you for your time and sharing all your ideas and your thoughts about our topics. That was really great, and thank you for sharing with us. I will continue in Spanish. Así que nuevamente muchas gracias a todos ustedes por acompañarnos en este espacio. Realmente fue muy provechoso. Esperamos que todos estos escenarios de conversación, de ideas, sean de mucho provecho para ustedes. Y quisiera mencionarles un último mensaje, recordar que la última sesión de Engage será el día 28 de noviembre. Será el día jueves de forma virtual. Por correo les estaremos informando nuevamente todos los detalles para que nos acompañen en este espacio. Sin más, agradecerles nuevamente por su tiempo, un gusto que nos acompañen acá y nos encontramos en la próxima sesión. Hasta luego, muchas gracias.
Hasta luego, bye.
Chao, mil gracias. Muchas gracias, Uwe. Qué pena